He reflects on being a sucker for video games since his childhood. Bjorn Yandel lies in a hospital bed playing a handheld video game. He started the hobby to kill time while hospitalized, and it eventually became an integral part of his life. Bjorn Yandel lies in bed holding a device horizontally with both hands as he taps the screen with intense focus. Bjorn Yandel lies in bed, angrily gripping his portable gaming device which displays a game over message. He curses in frustration, annoyed that the game's AI provided heals he didn't ask for. Everything in life, however, gets boring with enough time spent on it. He quits the game, tossing the portable console with its blue and green controllers onto a white surface. Bjorn Yandel reflects that he no longer has as much fun playing video games. A system defines the AOS genre, Attack on Sight, displaying a battle between fantasy heroes. It then defines RPG, a role-playing game, showing a character with stats and inventory. Finally, the system explains the FPS genre, a first-person shooter, from the perspective of a soldier aiming a rifle. The genre was not the issue, it was just that most new games that came out each year were uninspired. A voice dismisses them as mediocre at best for his taste. An online forum user complains about modern games, noting their strikingly similar storylines and backgrounds. The user points out how one game is nearly identical to another from the previous year, with only minor changes to the UI and models. Other users agree, lamenting the cliched plots, pay-to-win features, and the complete lack of depth in recent releases. Bjorn Yandel sits on a hospital bed in a patient gown, resting his chin on his hand next to his laptop with a bored expression. He thinks about how sick he is of his games and wishes for something special to play, recalling this was the moment he discovered a new one. Bjorn Yandel looks at a screen displaying game reviews, focusing on the title Dungeon & Stones and wondering what kind of game it is. The screen displays the title Dungeon & Stones above a pixelated dungeon entrance, its doors marked with a red gem and lit by 2 torches. The game is a single-player RPG created by an indie developer, featuring retro 2D pixel art graphics which are a rarity. Bjorn Yandel sits at his desk, intently scrolling on his laptop with a pensive expression as he reads about the English-only game. Bjorn Yandel looks at the retro game Dungeon & Stones on his monitor, considering it's free and worth a shot, before he clicks the button to start playing. Bjorn Yandel faces a pixel art character selection screen displaying 6 fantasy archetypes, including a shadowed character marked with question marks, and questions which one he is supposed to choose. Bjorn Yandel selects the Barbarian class from the character creation screen, thinking the choice is irrelevant since he won't be playing for long anyway. Bjorn Yandel looks at the game's interface, reading through the system notifications. He registers a new skill, a status ailment, and a blocked attack. He sees a prompt about reading a scroll which leads to an encounter with an unknown party. They offer a knight companion, presenting him with a choice, and he realizes what his objective is. Bjorn Yandel sits and contemplates the game, his expression shifting to frustration as he plays before he suddenly glances at a clock, his eyes widening in shock upon seeing it is already 10 p.m. Bjorn Yandel's blue eye glows intensely as sweat beads on his furrowed brow, his expression locked in a moment of powerful realization. A knight, a cleric, a mage, an archer, and a warrior stand in a line inside a dungeon. Bjorn Yandel explains that whenever his character died, a game over screen appeared, forcing him to start all over again from scratch. He recalls that he started playing this for fun. Bjorn Yandel sits up in his hospital bed, screaming in frustration at a game on his tablet after losing a stage. Erwin stands beside him with an annoyed expression, telling him to lower his voice and be considerate of the other patients. Bjorn Yandel looks flustered and apologetic, sweat forming on the side of his head. Bjorn Yandel holds one side of his headphones, concentrating as he mentally maps out a sequence of movements, 3 places up, 4 to the left, 1 down, and a final step to avoid the trap. He later became fully immersed in the game, deciding he could not give up after coming so far. Bjorn Yandel types a post on his laptop, stating that the game was so unpopular it had no walkthroughs available anywhere. He announces his decision to quit and focus on his life. He vows to beat the game by himself, even if it takes him a lifetime. Bjorn Yandel plays a game while hospitalized, during his time as a social service agent, and while commuting to work after college, focusing solely on Dungeon & Stone, where a pixelated barbarian appears on the character selection screen. Bjorn Yandel lies defeated on the ground under a spotlight as red text declaring "Yo you die Ed" appears over his body. An old video game menu presents 2 options: start a new game or delete the game, prompting an unseen person to curse in frustration before declaring they will go again. Bjorn Yandel's character stats flash on the screen as he dies repeatedly in the pixelated game. The "YOUDIED" message appears and he immediately restarts. His level increases from 7 to 8 and his battle index rises, but he reaches the 3rd floor only to open a trap and die again. He glares at the screen, pressing the button to start a new game over and over. 9 years pass. There is nothing to narrate. Bjorn Yandel swallows hard, a bead of sweat on his face as a wide grin stretches across his lips, his eyes hidden in shadow as he realizes he has finally arrived. Bjorn Yandel stares at his smartphone with a wide, manic grin, his pink eyes glowing as he realizes he has found the final boss's dungeon. Bjorn Yandel stands in a dark dungeon before a massive, torch-lit structure labeled the Gate of the Abyss. Bjorn Yandel throws his arms in the air, celebrating a gaming achievement in front of his computer monitor. Bjorn Yandel clenches his fists tightly, his eyes filling with tears as his expression becomes choked with emotion. Bjorn Yandel faces a system prompt asking if he will enter the boss room. He internally scoffs at the question, confirming his unwavering decision to enter the final boss's dungeon. A system prompt appears, warning that entry into the room is an irreversible decision and presents a choice between a highlighted yes and a no. Bjorn Yandel sits in a dark room, grinning smugly at his computer screen while playing a game. He places his hand on the mouse, taunting the game for trying to scare him in its final chapter before he clicks. A system message confirms the answer. YES has been selected and displays a request to wait. He accepts he will not defeat the boss on his first try, resolving instead to gather as much information as possible to create a strategy. Bjorn Yandel leans back in his office chair and stares at the glowing, loading text on his monitor, considering the upcoming boss's movement patterns, attributes, and possible instant death skills. Bjorn Yandel relaxes in a dark room, smiling with his eyes closed as he thinks about beating the boss on his first try. A notification chimes, and a loading bar appears before him, causing him to realize the system has finished processing. A system message declares they have set foot in the abyss. Bjorn Yandel realizes the situation as a system message appears, announcing the tutorial has been successfully cleared. Bjorn Yandel sits in a dimly lit room, his eyes glowing pink as he stares forward with a shocked expression, questioning the word tutorial. Bjorn Yandel leans forward and shouts at his computer screen, shocked to see the Korean word for rise in a game he believed only supported English. Bjorn Yandel grits his teeth in frustration over the time he wasted translating the word as a bright light flashes beside him. Bjorn Yandel sits at his desk as his monitors suddenly flash with a blue light, displaying a target confirmed message, and he recoils in shock. Bjorn Yandel is engulfed by a flash of intense blue energy, clutching his head in agony. Bjorn Yandel is engulfed by pulsating blue energy, writhing from excruciating pain that spreads across his entire body. He questions what is happening as a transmission process begins. I lost consciousness as the computer monitor in front of the empty chair emitted a blinding blue light and arcs of energy. A disembodied voice declares its congratulations to the young warriors. Bjorn Yandel stands on a raised platform with his warriors, holding an axe and spreading his arms to confront the crowd below. He declares they will leave the sanctified grounds, causing the people to murmur in confusion about who is speaking so loudly in the middle of the night. An armored leader shouts to a cheering crowd of warriors in a massive hall. Bjorn Yandel suddenly becomes aware of his surroundings, staring in shock at the scene before him. The narrator was completely lost for words. Flickering torches illuminate the area as imposing, muscular men with tattoos stand around. An enraged old man with a long beard yells, shouting that everyone will now pick up a weapon of their choice. Bjorn Yandel's silhouette glows with a yellow aura inside a swirling void, and he questions the mention of a weapon, wondering how he can understand an unfamiliar language before realizing he has no idea where he is. Bjorn Yandel tells himself to think. Bjorn Yandel sweats as he looks up, deep in thought, wondering what his first course of action should be in what he considers the unfriendly prologue of a difficult game. He realizes he must quickly figure out what's going on and gather as much information as he can. Bjorn Yandel extends his hand and assesses his physical condition, believing his body is perfectly fit until he suddenly pauses, realizing something is wrong. Bjorn Yandel holds his hands up, observing their new, larger size and defined muscles. He flexes his fingers and clenches a fist, testing his control over the unfamiliar body. Bjorn Yandel stands in the forest, his tattooed muscles straining as he speaks with a resolute yet strained expression. Bjorn Yandel stares in disbelief as glowing particles surround his muscular body, clenching his fist with a determined expression before shouting for the next person to walk up to the altar. Bjorn Yandel stands confused as a smiling, tattooed man shouts. The man demands to know what is happening and calls for Carrick, the third son of Fanun, to step forward. Bjorn Yandel and another warrior stand amidst fiery ruins as the ground begins to shake violently beneath them. Bjorn Yandel's gloved hand firmly grips the handle of his weapon. Bjorn Yandel lifts the large two-handed battle axe and shouts that it is an excellent choice, while Erwin stands beside him with a smirk. Bjorn Yandel, a scarred and bearded man, shouts with intensely glowing eyes, announcing that Carrick has begun his journey as a warrior before commanding Einar to step forward. Bjorn Yandel's expression shifts to one of sudden realization, a drop of sweat appearing on his face as he recognizes what is happening. Erwin smiles and holds up her chosen sword while Bjorn Yandel grins and brandishes his spear. He must be recognized as a warrior to go on the journey. Bjorn Yandel grins while holding a large mace, standing beside the imposing and partially visible Erwin against a fiery backdrop as he begins to speak. A voice declares that the glory of Rafdonia lies in the young warrior's path. Two arcing trails of golden light envelop a vast fortified city and its central castle. Bjorn Yandel's eyes widen in shocked realization, sweat beading on his furrowed brow. Bjorn Yandel stares at a character selection screen for Dungeon and Stone, which displays the options Human, Dwarf, Elf, Barbarian, and Beastwoman, and he chooses the highlighted Barbarian class. Bjorn Yandel looks forward with a strained and determined expression, emerging from a dark, chaotic background filled with glowing particles as he remembers. This is how the game began, when he chose the Barbarian character. Bjorn Yandel plays video game, moving his Barbarian character just before the entrance to the final boss's dungeon. Erwin yells in the background, his expression showing total disbelief. Bjorn Yandel stands in the foreground, jaw clenched and sweating from the intensity of the situation. A muscular man screams in terror, his face pale, while Bjorn Yandel stands with a grim expression. They both tremble as they realize this is how Dungeon and Stone begins. Bjorn Yandel sweats profusely, his face showing extreme confusion and fear as he trembles. Bjorn Yandel holds a thoughtful expression as Erwin trembles in fear behind him. Bjorn Yandel's expression shifts from worried realization to startled anger as an unexpected voice interrupts his thoughts, causing him to flinch and demand who spoke without permission. Bjorn Yandel's eyes glow red with an enraged expression as dark, crackling energy radiates from his body. Bjorn Yandel's face contorts with shock and rage, his yellow eyes glowing as he shouts an accusation, demanding to know when the intruder arrived. Bjorn Yandel screams, his face contorted in desperation and fury as sweat drips from his temple. Bjorn Yandel glares furiously at the confused man next to him, blaming him for the entire situation. Bjorn Yandel stares in shock, his eyes wide and sweat covering his distressed face. Bjorn Yandel, a grizzled man with an eye patch and a long white beard, stares intensely off-panel and says, "It has to be you." Bjorn Yandel recoils in shock, his eyes widening and his mouth hanging open as he asks if the topic is Dungeon and Stone. Erwin slices through Bjorn Yandel mid-sentence, her attack flipping him upside down as he stares in shocked pain while blood sprays from the wound. Bjorn Yandel stares in shock, his eyes wide as a gush of blood sprays past him. Blood splatters across Bjorn Yandel's wide, shocked eye as he clutches his arm. Erwin stands over him in full armor, holding a blood-covered axe. He questions what is happening, forcing himself to remain calm. Bjorn Yandel's face is tense, splattered with blood and sweat as his heart pounds. He thinks that he cannot show weakness, otherwise he will die just like the man before him. Orium, the son of Kadua, was possessed by an evil spirit, and he glares forward with glowing yellow eyes while holding a blood-splattered axe. A dark-haired man restrains Bjorn Yandel with a weapon, while Bjorn shouts at the young warriors, commanding them to forget everything the evil spirit said. Bjorn Yandel turns his back, his intricate tattoos glowing faintly as he shouts for the ceremony to resume, stating that he understands the situation. Bjorn Yandel maintains a serious expression while explaining to an anxious man that anyone who came from outside the game, including the two of them, are considered evil spirits. Bjorn Yandel stands with a distressed expression before a blood-splattered background, his tattoos visible. He thinks about a deadly secret, knowing they will die if it is discovered. Bjorn Yandel recalls a memory of a blood-splattered neck, a near decapitation. His armored feet stand on the chaotic ground beside his sheathed sword. He concludes that he almost lost his head and resolves to see the ceremony to its end without being discovered. Bjorn Yandel stands before his armored soldiers and a fallen body, announcing a small problem before commanding Serum, the fourth son of Kennick, to step forward. One man flinches and another steps back. Bjorn Yandel sweats, struggling to speak. Bjorn Yandel stands masked and tattooed, followed by Erwin, who, also masked and tattooed, steps forward. A voice yells that it has no idea what its name is. Bjorn Yandel looks down, his face spattered with blood and sweat as he shouts in frustration. He demands to know his own name and asks if he can summon a status window, screaming that he can't afford to guess with his life on the line. Bjorn Yandel's blue eye glares with intense focus from the shadows, blood splattered on the surface near his face. He accepts that the chances are slim, but this is the only path he can see forward. Bjorn Yandel clenches his hand into a tight fist, deciding he must take his chances. A heavily built man with a white beard and glowing yellow eyes is surrounded by a fiery aura as he opens his mouth wide and shouts, calling for Bjorn, son of Yandel, to step forward. Bjorn Yandel swallows hard, blood splattered across his muscular torso. Bjorn Yandel faces 3 muscular tribal warriors as he counts down the final 2 seconds. Bjorn Yandel stands with his back to the viewer, facing a silent crowd across a fiery pit in the arena as a rule for the contest is announced. Bjorn Yandel takes a step forward, his sandaled foot landing on the rough, warm ground of the arena. Bjorn Yandel stares forward with a determined expression, his face and chest splattered with blood as he thinks that must be his name. Bjorn Yandel stares forward with a determined expression, his face and muscular chest splattered with blood as a voice commands him to step forward. A muscular, blonde-haired man steps past Bjorn Yandel, who glares up at him with a bloodied face. Bjorn Yandel stares forward with a stern expression, his eyes glowing with an intense yellow light. Bjorn Yandel stares forward, his face splattered with blood and his expression set with determination as fire rages behind him. A voice calls out, "Young warrior." Bjorn Yandel laughs triumphantly, holding his sword and pointing forward. He shouts for his opponent to pick a weapon, declaring that he was right. Bjorn Yandel grins with determination, his face covered in blood and sweat as he shouts that his name is Bjorn, son of Yandel. Bjorn Yandel stands injured with blood on his face and chest, clenching his fist as a determined expression sets on his face while fiery energy sparks around him. A collection of melee weapons, including swords, spears, and a mace, hangs on a wall. Barbarians have great physicality to compensate for their lack of magical affinity, which is why he built his barbarian as a melee attacker when he was less experienced. He realizes he knows just the right sort of item to choose. Bjorn Yandel stands over a structure of sharp, upward-pointing spears, blood on his tattooed shoulder as he looks down with a determined expression, having made his choice. Bjorn Yandel looks intensely to the side, his stern expression showing surprise. Bjorn Yandel holds up a metal shield, his face set in determination as he recognizes it as the best possible starting item for a barbarian. A voice declares that Bjorn, son of Yandel, has now taken the first step toward becoming a warrior. The words, "SYN synchronization complete," appear within an ornate frame. An alert sounds from the computer setup in an empty, dimly lit room. A system message appears, announcing the overall item level has increased to 24, and that character data and journal entries will be logged and sent to the administrator. A system window displays Bjorn Yandel's status, showing him at level 1 with 25 physique, 35 spirit, and 1 special ability. His item level is 24, a new increase of 24, and his general combat power is 67, a new increase of 6. He is now a barbarian. Bjorn Yandel's barbarian game avatar is repeatedly defeated by a large monster. He tries using a greatsword but dies easily due to poor defense. He switches to a 2-handed battle axe, a warhammer, and a flail, but every attempt ends in failure. Bjorn Yandel clutches his head in frustration, unable to figure out how to make his character more resilient. Bjorn Yandel's berserker barbarian avatar stands on a dark battlefield, spattered in blood. His eyes glow as he holds a large sword, wearing spiked armor amongst scattered broken weapons. Bjorn Yandel stands with his back to the viewer, looking into a dimly lit marketplace lined with weapon stalls as 2 large swords rest crossed on his back. Bjorn Yandel stands in heavy armor, radiating light as a golden shield floats beside him. He questions using a barbarian as a damage dealer, thinking about their vitality and strength, which provide the fundamentals to be played as a tanker. Bjorn Yandel holds a hand to his face, his expression serious as he considers his strategy. He contemplates reworking his battle tactics and changing a team member's role, confident in his analysis of the barbarian and deciding to try out his new plan. An orange and yellow explosion erupts, sending debris flying outward. Bjorn Yandel stands defensively with his hammer and shield, staring up in shock at the colossal, bloodied, dragon-like creature looming over him. Bjorn Yandel's character deals 6 damage to the cockatrice and reflects its attack back for another 6 damage, taking only 1 damage himself. He uses the smash skill for an effective 10 damage, knocking down the monster. He clears the dungeon, gains 3 experience points, and his comprehensive score rises to 225, a new S rank. Bjorn Yandel smirks confidently with a sinister glint in his eyes, believing this is both awesome and the most logical decision he can make based on his knowledge of the game. A voice declares it has no regrets. A voice screams the command to open the gate. Bjorn Yandel and Erwin stand with their backs turned, observing a massive fortress gate with large chains as a heavy thud impacts it from the other side. Bjorn Yandel stands with an apprehensive expression amidst a silent crowd at night. After completing the ceremony, the barbarians must enter the labyrinth. Bjorn Yandel's eyes show his determination, his brow furrowed in concentration. Bjorn Yandel stands with 2 armored companions, their backs turned as they face a large, chained gateway under the name RAF Donia, while a voice commands them to embark on their journey. Bjorn Yandel shouts intensely with a determined expression, declaring that this is where destiny leads. Bjorn Yandel screams as he leads an enraged mob charging forward under a dark sky, a towering monster looming in the distant background. Bjorn Yandel screams with his mouth wide open, his face twisted in panic and covered in sweat. Bjorn Yandel and several muscular, tattooed men sprint frantically forward through the darkness, running without knowing which direction they are supposed to go. The town's rooftops are bathed in a soft light at night when a voice screams to stop. Bjorn Yandel yells with a frustrated expression, shouting that he is lost and then questioning someone's shamelessness and disbelief. The angry men turn on Carrick, shouting that he led them astray and does not deserve to be their leader. Bjorn Yandel scoffs at the mob, thinking them hypocrites for following blindly only moments ago. Erwin holds Bjorn Yandel's arm as he stands in resignation. He shouts that he accepts and acknowledges it, declaring he will no longer lead from the front. Einar, a muscular woman with blonde braids and tribal tattoos, strikes a confident pose and shouts emphatically, declaring that she will be leading from the front. Bjorn Yandel smirks confidently, his intense yellow eyes fixed forward. Bjorn Yandel's expression hardens as he furrows his brow, his intense blue eyes looking off-panel while he considers the name Einar. Bjorn Yandel's yellow eyes widen with a shocked and distressed expression as he realizes he is lost. Then he shouts in disbelief upon hearing the same from someone else. Bjorn Yandel shouts with an alarmed expression, yelling that the situation is dire and they must get to the labyrinth before it's too late. Bjorn Yandel watches as a dark-haired man shouts his disapproval of Einar's leadership, demanding Jin, the second son of Tetran, take his place, which causes others in the group to immediately argue back. Bjorn Yandel stands on a chaotic street, observing the frustrated people around him. He internally questions their intelligence, knowing they will not reach the labyrinth in time at this rate, but he refrains from stepping up to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Bjorn Yandel taps Erwin under her chin to get her attention. A distressed Erwin looks up at Bjorn Yandel, asking if he is also there to blame her. He stands over her with a stern expression, remaining silent. Bjorn Yandel holds a finger to his lips, whispering that he will tell them how to navigate. Erwin stammers a question, her eyes wide with stress and disbelief. A hand points toward three figures walking away near a large stone building. Bjorn Yandel walks with his party through the dark city street, observing three other adventurers fully equipped in armor. He internally scoffs at the barbaric and uncivilized meatheads, deducing they can only be headed to one place. Erwin follows beside him with a distressed expression. Bjorn Yandel stands with a serious expression next to a surprised blonde woman, stating that he understands and will give it a try. Bjorn Yandel watches with a cynical expression as a man named Einar holds up a large sword and announces he found a way to the labyrinth, prompting muscular men to cheer and call him wise. He becomes convinced they have no brains. An unseen leader screams a war cry, ordering a charge toward the dark fortress looming under the cloudy night sky. Bjorn Yandel and a crowd of silhouetted figures gaze in awe at a massive, glowing purple energy vortex, recognizing it as the labyrinth, the sacred ground of battle. Bjorn Yandel looks forward with a mix of apprehension and determination, a bead of sweat on his temple as he swallows hard, questioning if it is wise to enter the labyrinth for real. Bjorn Yandel stands alone under a spotlight, looking downcast and thinking no one would notice if he fled. Bjorn Yandel lies in a hospital bed with an IV stand nearby, holding a small electronic device as he reflects on his poor health and never having thrown a punch in his life. Bjorn Yandel stares with worried eyes, his brow furrowed in thought as sweat beads on his skin. He questions his ability to kill a monster lurking in the shadows and desperately seeks a way to pay the Ravdonian tax without entering the labyrinth. A frustrated voice screams out, expressing its hatred for the tax system. A crown rests on a closed treasure chest surrounded by a pile of gold coins as more coins fall from above. A gray monster and a red monster with glowing eyes stand in an aggressive stance against a fiery background, representing the method of fighting monsters in a labyrinth to earn money. A server places a basket of bread on a wooden table inside a pub for two patrons, one of whom laughs during their conversation. A problem is revealed. Bjorn Yandel stands with his back to two men who shout that they don't hire uncivilized barbarians or meatheads. Bjorn Yandel stares forward in thought, surrounded by purple particles. He considers the game's programming that forbids barbarians from working regular jobs, forcing them to fight. He realizes that if this world has different rules, he might not have to fight monsters. A system message announces the gate portal will close in 10 minutes. A purple energy gate to the labyrinth crackles with electricity, its core emitting a blinding white light. The gate only opens once a month. Bjorn Yandel stands in the town square, illuminated by the purple glow from the gate, and considers the consequences of failing to enter. He knows he will have to wait an entire month before the next opening, and worries that he cannot get a regular job as a barbarian. He calculates his food will only last for 1 week, leaving his future uncertain. Bjorn Yandel stands with a strained, determined expression, sweat dripping down his face as dark energy swirls around his lower body. He realizes this is his only chance to enter, but he cannot move, his feet feeling as if they are glued to the ground. Bjorn Yandel's face is cast in shadow, his expression tense as sweat drips down his skin while his heart pounds with the realization that he is no longer playing a game, and his real life is now on the line. Erwin places a hand on Bjorn Yandel's chest, and he flinches sharply from the sudden contact. Erwin holds a man by the shoulder, her eyes glowing yellow as he looks up at her with a shocked expression, stammering her identity as Einar, the third daughter of Fenelon. Bjorn Yandel urgently shouts to the second daughter, telling her all other warriors have entered the gate portal. He states that they are the only 2 remaining and must hurry because they arrived late and have little time. Bjorn Yandel and Erwin watch the purple gate shrink rapidly as 2 distant figures run towards it. A voice announces the portal will close in 5 minutes, its form visibly getting smaller with each passing second. Bjorn Yandel, wearing a blindfold, turns his head slightly as Erwin stands behind him with a concerned expression. He tells her to go on ahead, promising he will be right behind her, and she agrees. Erwin smiles up at Bjorn Yandel as a bright purple aura radiates from her body, thanking him for his previous advice. Bjorn Yandel looks determined as he speaks, a slight bead of sweat on his face. Erwin looks down at Bjorn Yandel, asking him how she can become wise like he is. She states she has never seen a barbarian as smart as him in her entire life and declares that she wants to be like him. Bjorn Yandel stares with a stern, annoyed expression as an overlay of a muscular man labeled Brain Power O appears with the text, "You need to be reborn." Bjorn Yandel's exasperated expression shifts as he processes the advice to think before moving, his face showing a moment of clear understanding. Erwin smiles with her eyes closed, clenching a fist as a purple glow envelops her body. She shouts her gratitude for the advice, promising to pay him back if she returns alive from the labyrinth. Bjorn Yandel looks to the side, contemplating the fearless nature of barbarians from the game. He turns his head forward, his expression hardening into an intense and angry glare. He asks Einar directly if she is also afraid of dying. Erwin's mouth parts slightly in surprise. Erwin stands resolutely as pulsing purple energy envelops her, her eyes glowing with confidence. Erwin smiles confidently as she delivers her challenge, while Bjorn Yandel stands behind her with a serious and contemplative expression. Bjorn Yandel's eyes glow with a purple light, his expression hardening with intense determination as he comes to a realization. Erwin stands in her armor, holding a sword and shield as she smiles confidently and nods while looking away. Bjorn Yandel flexes his muscular, tattooed torso and firmly grips his metallic shield, declaring that he is a barbarian. Bjorn Yandel slams his foot into the ground, a glowing aura erupting from the impact as he sets his face in a grimace of strained resolve, pushing past his fear with only 1 minute left. Bjorn Yandel unleashes a massive burst of purple magical energy as he declares he must act, startling Erwin, who watches from the background. Bjorn Yandel channels purple energy and lightning as a chaotic portal erupts from his body, throwing Erwin backward with the force. A voice echoes the final, urgent declaration to survive. A system message appears, announcing entry into the crystal cave on the first floor while water drips down. Bjorn Yandel's blue eye stares forward with intense focus. Bjorn Yandel stands confused in a dark, indistinct space, gripping his shield as he looks around in surprise and questions his location. Bjorn Yandel looks to the right with a confident expression, stating he is an expert when it comes to dungeons and stone. Bjorn Yandel looks to the side with an intense, determined expression. Bjorn Yandel believed the barbarian's strong physicality combined with his game knowledge was more than enough to survive, but then he realizes he was wrong. Bjorn Yandel squints and turns his head in frustration, unable to see anything in the dark surroundings. Erwin faces 3 muscular, tattooed warriors poised with bladed weapons and realizes he was not the only one who entered the labyrinth with just a single item. Bjorn Yandel analyzes the pixelated dungeon map displayed on a game interface, his thoughts beginning with his current knowledge. Bjorn Yandel rests his chin on his fist, his expression a mix of thoughtful and frustrated. He realizes the glowing crystals on the labyrinth walls were the source of light, making his torch unnecessary at the start. The location is identified as a dark area, one of the few sections on the first floor of the labyrinth that is completely devoid of light and covered by shadows. Bjorn Yandel stands with his back to the viewer inside a dark labyrinth, holding his shield as shadowy energy swirls around him. He considers that these areas are not supposed to be starting places, but reasons that since this is not a game, the locations could be determined randomly. Bjorn Yandel holds his shield firmly, his gaze steady and determined as he looks off to the side, deciding to open his status window first. He cycles through potential system commands, calling for the equipment window, character information, and stats before questioning how to open his inventory, skills, or journal. Bjorn Yandel stands in the darkness holding his shield, his face contorted in frustration as he internally curses that nothing is working, though he admits he didn't have high expectations. Bjorn Yandel extends his tattooed arm and presses his hand against a dark, rough surface, deciding he must advance in one direction rather than stand still. Bjorn Yandel moves cautiously through the dark, rocky environment, his hand and foot tapping lightly against the stone surfaces. Bjorn Yandel questions if he is advancing too slowly, thinking it may be faster to crawl on the ground. He decides to remain cautious, wary of what might be ahead, but a sudden crushing sound interrupts his thoughts. Bjorn Yandel's face twists in a furious, strained expression as he struggles to force a sound from his throat. A scream of pure agony rings out. Bjorn Yandel collapses to his knees, screaming as a spiked goblin trap snaps shut on his leg, splattering blood onto the ground. A jagged goblin trap clamps down on Bjorn Yandel's leg, its metal teeth tearing into his flesh as blood gushes from the wound. Bjorn Yandel's face contorts in agony, sweat covering his brow as he bites down hard on his own hand, struggling to keep something suppressed. A character struggles internally not to raise their voice, their heart pounding as they pant for breath. Bjorn Yandel kneels defensively in a dark cavern, panting heavily beside splattered blood as he deduces that only goblins use traps on this floor, concluding one is probably watching him from nearby. Bjorn Yandel's brow furrows with tension, sweat soaking his forehead as his eyes stare forward with intense focus. Bjorn Yandel's brow furrows with stress as his face tenses, realizing he might be wrong. Bjorn Yandel considers that he might have been lucky, speculating he stepped on the trap only because the goblin had gone somewhere else. Bjorn Yandel kneels on the blood-splattered ground, bracing himself defensively behind his large metal shield. He resolves that if he cannot be certain of something, he must take the worst-case scenario into account. A dark goblin stares forward, its eyes glowing bright red against the dark background. Bjorn Yandel stands with his back turned, his body strained as he holds his shield, and he watches a small, red-eyed creature approach from the darkness, realizing it has identified him as injured prey. A monstrous creature snarls with glowing red eyes, patiently waiting with a raised claw until its victim loses consciousness from the pain. Bjorn Yandel breathes deeply, sweat beading on his face and neck as he focuses his thoughts with a grim and determined expression, knowing what he must do first. Bjorn Yandel's sandaled foot is caught in a sharp metal bear trap, the teeth digging into his flesh and causing it to bleed. He realizes the trap is coated in paralysis poison and mentally curses the inadequate sandals he was given instead of leather boots. Bjorn Yandel grits his teeth and sweats profusely, his body shaking from intense strain. He internally scolds himself for whining and decides he must act quickly. He understands a fight is inevitable and resolves to be the one to strike first. Bjorn Yandel's bare foot is bloody and injured on the dark floor as he drags his other leg, realizing the poison is spreading as his right foot goes completely numb. Bjorn Yandel drags his bleeding, paralyzed foot across the desolate ground while holding his shield. He pants heavily from the exertion, searching for his opponent who remains hidden. Bjorn Yandel screams furiously with sweat dripping down his neck and cheek, demanding his opponent show themselves. Bjorn Yandel stands with his back to the viewer, facing the silent, dark cavern with his shield held ready as blood drips from a wound on his leg, and he considers that the hidden goblin might only be in his head. He accepts that he may look like a fool, his body going limp. Bjorn Yandel pants heavily, gritting his teeth as sweat covers his face while he speaks. Erwin limps as she supports Bjorn Yandel, who drags his heavily bloodied leg across the rough ground while panting and insulting her. His mind flashes with thoughts of his dad and sister being goblins as he feels his body go limp. He recognizes the bleeding will not stop and becomes dizzy, wondering if this is what it feels like to lose too much blood. Bjorn Yandel stands injured on a blood-stained floor, staring up at the massive green-skinned goblin wielding an axe. He feels intoxicated like he is drunk on alcohol, identifies the creature as a goblin, and orders it to stop its advance. Bjorn Yandel's eye widens, his brow furrowing as he registers the sound of a footstep. He realizes it has to be the goblin. Bjorn Yandel smirks over his shoulder, having heard a sound from behind and realizing something followed him after he moved out of its sight. Bjorn Yandel stands in the dark, realizing he still cannot see his pursuer and that his situation is unchanged, so he considers pretending to run away as a tactic. Bjorn Yandel limps across the wooden floor on his bare feet, one of which is completely covered in blood. A pair of bare feet steps across a dark wooden floor. Bjorn Yandel brings his shield down, stopping the goblin's axe mid-swing. Bjorn Yandel sweats, his face strained as he realizes the beast follows him at a certain distance and stops whenever he stops moving. A monstrous creature with glowing red eyes stares forward. its mouth twisted into a wide, menacing grin as it emits a low, guttural growl. Bjorn Yandel staggers forward, heavily injured, before his legs give out and he collapses to the cave floor as a small goblin with an axe watches him from the darkness. Bjorn Yandel lies collapsed on the ground, his face covered in shadow as he looks intently upward. A green-skinned creature stands aggressively in a dark, blood-splattered cavern, gripping an axe and letting out a low growl. The green-skinned creature glares with wide eyes, baring its sharp teeth in agitation as it growls before its expression shifts to confusion. Bjorn Yandel reels as a rock strikes him in the back of the head, his expression contorting in shock from the sudden impact. Bjorn Yandel smirks as small rocks hit his body, a test from goblins to see if he is alive. He hears heavier steps approaching and turns his head, anticipating the real threat. A goblin creature looms over Bjorn Yandel, who lies defeated on the ground. The creature grips its axe and growls as it steps toward him. A large, dark hand grips Bjorn Yandel's head. Bjorn Yandel's eyes glow a menacing red as he glares forward. Erwin watches nearby, her eye wide with absolute terror. Bjorn Yandel glares intensely at an unseen opponent and shouts that he has been waiting for them. Bjorn Yandel swings his weapon with furious strength at the green monster, but the attack misses completely, causing him to snarl in frustration. Bjorn Yandel looks down in shock as a powerful red energy suddenly engulfs his hand. Bjorn Yandel's hand, enveloped in red energy, moves forward on its own, reaching out against his will. Bjorn Yandel growls as his body radiates a red glow, slamming down with immense force and creating a powerful impact. He can feel and accurately predict the goblin's movements. Bjorn Yandel's body glows with an intense red aura as his heartbeat thumps, and he shouts with a fierce expression that he is superior. Bjorn Yandel unleashes a powerful red energy blast from his hand, which is surrounded by intense light and impact effects. His heart thuds with a sudden realization he is in the body of a barbarian warrior. Bjorn Yandel screams in agony as a powerful red aura erupts from his bloodied and injured body, causing his eyes to glow with the same crimson light while chaotic energy surges violently around him. Bjorn Yandel, injured and grimacing, unleashes a powerful glowing red strike. A glowing fist makes impact, sending out a shockwave and splattering blood. A monster's snarling maw connects in a violent, blood-spattering impact. Bjorn Yandel, bloodied and furious, smashes his wrapped fists downward onto an obscured target. A crushing impact sends a burst of white across a red background. The impact leaves a vast frozen expanse. Red streaks stain the white surface. Ice particles and dust drift through the air. A heavily wounded goblin lies on the blood-splattered surface, its mouth open as it pants from exhaustion. Bjorn Yandel kneels over the bleeding body of Erwin as smoky energy begins to rise from the goblin's wounds. Bjorn Yandel pants heavily, blood and sweat splattered across his distressed face as he watches the body disappear. He realizes it is just like in the game. A luminous red gem rests on a dark surface, emitting light as a swirl of energy and sparkles forms around it. Bjorn Yandel holds a glowing red gem in his dirty, bandaged hand, recognizing it as the currency used in the Dungeon and Stone universe. Bjorn Yandel pants heavily, his face covered in sweat and injuries, as he holds a glowing red Tier 9 Mana Stone and thinks about what he can buy with it. Bjorn Yandel holds the valuable Tier 9 Mana Stone, concluding he can only afford a single piece of bread with it. Bjorn Yandel chuckles, his blood-spattered face twisted into a defiant smirk. He curses in frustration, realizing all the hardship was for this single outcome. Bjorn Yandel turns his muscular, tattooed back and presses one hand against a dark wall, struggling to stay upright. A voice speaks from the void, its words glowing white in the darkness to announce its presence in the world. Monsters dwell within the labyrinth, a space filled with swirling purple energy. A dragon and a minotaur stand among them. A defeated creature dissolves into dust, leaving behind an axe as loot. Various fantasy races walk the streets of a town outside the labyrinth, coexisting peacefully in an environment identical to the game. He knows without a doubt that he is inside the game universe. Bjorn Yandel limps forward on his bloodied feet, one bare and the other in a tattered sandal. He resolves to never get confused and think this is only a game. Bjorn Yandel stands wounded in a dark cave, blood splattered on the ground at his feet as he limps forward. A system notification appears, warning him that he is taking damage from bleeding as he is dragged across the ground. Bjorn Yandel takes damage from bleeding as he drags his heavily injured body across the ground, panting from the exertion and leaving a trail of blood in his wake. Bjorn Yandel's face is slick with blood and sweat, his expression contorted in agony as a system message appears, warning him that he is taking damage from bleeding. Bjorn Yandel drags his heavily injured body across the rough ground, leaving a trail of blood as he crawls to avoid further injury to his foot and move more quickly. He realized the best part was that he no longer had to worry about stepping on another trap. Bjorn Yandel's bloody foot is mangled by the sharp teeth of a bear trap, and system messages repeatedly announce that he is taking damage from the unstoppable bleeding. Bjorn Yandel, heavily injured and covered in blood, drags his body across the rocky terrain in a desperate search for help. Bjorn Yandel grits his teeth, sweating and panting from exhaustion as he struggles through the dark reddish area. He is injured and drags himself forward, believing he can escape by traveling in a single direction. Bjorn Yandel recalls the man who was beheaded during the ceremony, his face showing terror as he wonders about the man's fate. He receives repeated system notifications warning him of bleeding damage until a final alert declares his health has fallen below 5%. A core belief is stated: they need a glimpse of hope to rely on when they are in despair. A system message warns that the character may die without timely treatment, and the character's thoughts express his despair. Bjorn Yandel is dragged across the rocky ground, his heavily injured body leaving a long trail of blood. Bjorn Yandel grits his teeth in pain, his face splattered with blood and sweat as he looks up. He watches the surrounding darkness slowly begin to brighten, confirming his belief that the entire floor was not permanently dark. Bjorn Yandel clenches his bloodied fists and stares at a distant light in the darkness, thinking he must reach it before deciding his next move. Bjorn Yandel pants heavily, covered in blood and sweat from his injuries as he struggles to stay upright, believing that other adventurers will surely come to help him. Bjorn Yandel stands over the injured Erwin, his body glowing with power as he smirks menacingly down at her. Bjorn Yandel smirks maliciously in profile, questioning why anyone would help a dying barbarian with no skills besides brute force. He realizes he has lost a significant amount of blood. Bjorn Yandel, covered in sweat and blood, wears a determined smirk as he asks what else he is supposed to do besides wait for death. He realizes he must be hallucinating right now. Bjorn Yandel watches with a disturbed expression as a large, shadowy purple entity hovers over a bloodied, reaching hand, and he questions if the creature was his alter ego. Bjorn Yandel's face distorts as his vision glitches. He feels his consciousness slipping, certain he is about to faint from the strain. A voice laughs manically, vowing to survive at all costs while taunting an unseen person that they will die, before the thought breaks down into a desperate plea for anyone to help. A disembodied voice screams that he is a dense motherfucker who will die anyway, demanding to know why he does not just give up. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood and tattoos, gets dragged downwards past his broken shield as he screams his refusal to give up. Light finally appears, followed by a red system warning that health has reached a critical level below 4%. Bjorn Yandel is bloodied and bruised, his eyes glowing blue as he pants heavily and clenches his fists. A voice screams out, pleading for anyone to help. Bjorn Yandel, Erwin, and a third warrior are struck by a sudden impact, sending them plummeting through the dark, crystalline environment. The purple-haired man shouts for the adventurers and points into the distance, telling Drows he sees a barbarian slowly dying, which makes the blonde man turn in surprise to question the discovery. Red system warnings flash, alerting the barbarian that his health has dropped below 4% from ongoing bleeding damage, then falling again to a critical 2%. Bjorn Yandel pants from exhaustion as a system notification appears, informing him that he unlocked an achievement for having his HP drop to 2% or lower, permanently increasing his spirit stat by 1. Bjorn Yandel is on the ground, bloodied and panting heavily as he looks up at an armored individual, desperately pleading for help. A group of well-equipped adventurers looks down with annoyance at Bjorn Yandel, who is severely injured and struggling on the ground, unable to even speak properly as he pants for breath. Bjorn Yandel strains with glowing blue eyes, his face covered in blood and sweat as he grits his teeth and screams for help. Bjorn Yandel stands in ornate plate armor, his expression stern as he looks directly forward with the hilt of his sword visible over his shoulder. Bjorn Yandel lets out a quiet chuckle, a smug smirk forming on his face. Bjorn Yandel smirks in his armor and asks Sister Ursina to heal the wounded man kneeling on the cavern floor. Erwin is shocked by this request, suddenly realizing their party includes a cleric. Erwin radiates a golden glow, her expression determined as she looks to the side and firmly declines. Bjorn Yandel looks forward with a slight, knowing smile, understanding the situation as if he had expected it all along. Bjorn Yandel asks the armored man, Patsran, for a health potion. Patsran looks surprised by the request. Bjorn tells him not to be stingy, insisting they have plenty and promising to pay after they get outside, while Erwin observes silently in the background. Bjorn Yandel holds a vial of swirling pink liquid in his gloved hand and taps it. Bjorn Yandel smiles as he administers a red liquid from a vial into Erwin's shoulder, telling him it will hurt. Erwin pants in pain and begs him to hurry up. Bjorn Yandel pours a glowing red liquid from a bottle onto Erwin's bare foot, causing a red aura to emanate from the skin. Bjorn Yandel's eye widens, its pupil glowing purple, as a system message notifies him that his health is regenerating quickly. He feels a throbbing sensation and questions what is happening to his body. Bjorn Yandel's face contorts in extreme pain as he screams, yelling repeatedly that it hurts. His entire body feels like it is about to explode. He wonders if this is why players were not allowed to use healing potions during battle in the game. A voice screams that this hurts like shit. An overturned bottle spills a thick, red liquid across the dark ground. Bjorn Yandel lies face down, panting heavily and sweating on the blood-stained ground, surrounded by glowing blue crystals. Bjorn Yandel kneels on the glowing purple ground, his tattooed body stained with blood as he hunches over and shakes in pain. Bjorn Yandel pants heavily, sweat pouring down his strained face as one of his eyes radiates a bright blue light. An unseen speaker demands to know how the newbie arrived before the rest of them. The heavily armored Bjorn Yandel smiles as he stands dominantly over Erwin, who is prostrate on the ground. Bjorn Yandel looks up, his body battered and bleeding, as he realizes the offer to buy information about a secret entrance was the true reason he was saved. Bjorn Yandel stands injured and sweating among glowing crystalline structures, looking up and forward with a strained expression. Bjorn Yandel stands in the dark labyrinth, his hand near his chin as he contemplates what he has read in a book, remembering that it is possible but extremely rare for an adventurer to spawn in a dark area due to dimensional instability. Bjorn Yandel turns his head in profile, his face bloodied and sweating as he grimaces with a questioning expression. A white-bearded cleric and a pink-haired mage stand together, a party of seasoned adventurers aiming to go far into the labyrinth. He realizes that he, a complete novice, experienced something that even they had not. Bjorn Yandel smirks while standing over the kneeling, tattooed man, thanking him for his story before taking a step forward as Erwin watches with a serious expression. Bjorn Yandel smirks confidently, telling the other person not to worry about the potion because it's on him. Bjorn Yandel is bloodied and scarred, his expression determined as he stares off to the side. 5 adventurers walk forward through a dark cave illuminated by large, glowing blue crystals. Bjorn Yandel's bloodied hand strains to lift the heavy, riveted metallic object. Bjorn Yandel thinks that he survived and that he should be grateful and happy right now. Bjorn Yandel stands covered in bloodstains and tattoos, clutching his large metal shield in a dark, confined space, thinking it feels terrible to be on the receiving end of pity. Bjorn Yandel leads his party of 4 adventurers down a rocky cavern path illuminated by a bright light. Bjorn Yandel calls the barbarian a lucky bastard while speaking with Erwin inside the dungeon. Erwin questions what is so lucky about nearly dying. Bjorn dismisses the barbarian's incompetence, stating that stepping on a first-floor goblin trap meant his only luck was in encountering their party. Bjorn Yandel smirks at Erwin, stating their target was lucky to have encountered drows instead of them. He reminds her she was against using a potion on the man because there are too many fools like him. He then asks for her agreement, addressing her as Sister Ursina, and she matches his smug expression while holding her quiver. Erwin stands with a stern expression, her long red hair falling over an elaborate white and gold ceremonial outfit adorned with a sun emblem. Erwin glares furiously at Bjorn Yandel, standing protectively in front of a solemn woman. He tells Bjorn not to drag her into their argument, insisting she would have helped if not for the temple's laws. Bjorn Yandel smirks, replying that he's seen enough hypocrites that he can never be too sure. Bjorn Yandel gestures animatedly while lecturing Owen, telling her to learn about proper behavior from Drow's example with the barbarian. He explains that Drows deliberately framed his question because barbarians hate being indebted, while Owen listens to his lesson intently. Bjorn Yandel touches his chin and smiles widely in a gesture of false modesty. Bjorn Yandel and Erwin stand on rocky terrain, looking at a long blood trail ahead of them as Erwin questions how much longer they have to walk. Bjorn Yandel and Erwin stand together, looking ahead with cautious expressions as Erwin comments on their target's astounding resilience. She supposes he wasn't just lucky to have crawled this far and confidently states he will stop somewhere nearby. Bjorn Yandel leads his party through a dark cave, pointing towards an opening and stating they need to turn for a shortcut, while Erwin comments on the usefulness of having a wayfinder. The archer explains to Erwin that not all wayfinders memorize the entire map, clarifying that most just know the general direction. Erwin reacts with surprise, questioning if this is true. Bjorn Yandel stands behind them in the cave, observing their conversation. Bjorn Yandel looks to his left with a puzzled expression, audibly confused by what is happening. Bjorn Yandel and Erwin stand in their armor at the base of a massive, ancient structure, looking up at a glowing doorway high above them. Bjorn Yandel taps his gloved fingers against a dark, textured surface. Bjorn Yandel looks up at a massive column of swirling blue-white energy erupting from the ground. Bjorn Yandel lies on the ground in his armor, laughing as he announces the portal to the second floor and tells everyone to go. Erwin maneuvers past the colossal armored legs of Bjorn Yandel, looking back over her shoulder with an alarmed expression. Bjorn Yandel, Erwin, and their two companions turn their heads in unison, their attention captured by a bright, shimmering light appearing in the background. The adventurers stand over a blood-splattered bear trap on the dark stone ground, where a single sandal lies discarded. One of them points, recognizing the sandal as the one worn by the barbarian. The older, hooded man smirks confidently and raises his hand as a burst of golden energy erupts around it. Bjorn Yandel stands at the bottom of a dark chasm, his body a bright humanoid light source emitting powerful energy upwards past the blood-stained walls. An elderly man, two men in armor, and two women stare upward, their faces illuminated by a brilliant light, their expressions filled with shock and awe. Bjorn Yandel asks the hooded Erwin how far they are from where they encountered the barbarian, stating it must be about 10 miles if the hidden shortcut was not used. Bjorn Yandel grins sinisterly with glowing yellow eyes, a bead of sweat on his face as he laughs and swallows, impressed that someone crawled through absolute darkness with such a resilient body. Erwin stares at Bjorn Yandel's back, her face filled with shock and outrage as she questions him. Bjorn Yandel looks to the side with a stressed and contemplative expression, questioning if he could have endured for hours without hope. He realizes he paid little attention before, but now remembers the man held his right hand up the entire time they met. Erwin looks down at the kneeling Bjorn Yandel. Bjorn holds a glowing red mana stone in his tattooed hands, his eyes staring forward with intensity. Bjorn Yandel extends his scarred hand, presenting a glowing red gem as an item of value to offer in exchange for something he needs. Bjorn Yandel looks down with a smug grin, a single bead of sweat forming on his face. An unseen speaker asks Strauss to remember the name of the barbarian, questioning the idea that the man was lucky to meet them or would have met the same fate elsewhere before declaring there was no way in hell. Bjorn Yandel screams in pain, his eyes glowing blue as blood spatters across his face. Bjorn Yandel screams in agony, his entire body enveloped in a chaotic red aura as blood covers him completely. A system message announces the defeat of a goblin. He survived a near-death incident. Two notification boxes appear, each stating, "Yo, you have defeated a goblin." Bjorn Yandel drives his shield forward, smashing a goblin with a forceful impact that creates a bright flash and sends debris flying. A notification confirms the goblin's defeat. Bjorn Yandel stands splattered with blood, holding his shield up during the chaotic battle. He looks startled, questioning the endless number of goblins swarming him. He realizes his initial nervousness was misplaced, as the creatures are no real threat as long as he can see them. Bjorn Yandel looks down at the blood-soaked ground, spotting a poorly hidden metal jaw trap near a sandaled foot. He internally scoffs at the moronic placement, thinking he would have at least covered it with dirt. A goblin creature lunges with a raised axe as Bjorn Yandel reflects that the ambushes were too obvious, his own bandaged and bloody arm visible as he faces the attack. Bjorn Yandel slams his shield into the goblin's head, causing blood to spray from the point of impact. Bjorn Yandel looks intensely to his left, his face splattered with blood and his expression grim. Bjorn Yandel grapples with an unseen force, his face bloodied and contorted with determined effort as he growls in frustration and hunger. Bjorn Yandel stops and looks over his shoulder, a look of realization on his face as he holds a glowing pouch and remembers the chieftain gave it to him. Bjorn Yandel collapses, his bloodied torso and legs crumpling onto the ground. Bjorn Yandel stands splattered in blood, his face contorted in frustration as he holds a blood-soaked object and internally curses his decision to crawl on the dungeon floor. The title, Surviving the Game as a Barbarian, marks the beginning of Chapter 5. Bjorn Yandel bites down hard on his own bloody arm, tearing away a piece of his flesh with a grimace. Bjorn Yandel sits bloodied on the ground, biting into a small food item and deciding to preserve his rations by eating only when he absolutely must. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood, focuses intently on a small piece of dry bread, thinking it tastes better than steak due to his extreme hunger. Bjorn Yandel's face and gloved hand are splattered with blood as he chews something with a grim and intense expression, stating that he is now getting thirsty. Bjorn Yandel sits injured and weary in a cavern filled with glowing blue crystals, his shield resting beside him. He wonders where to find water, thinking nothing is ever easy and recalling a nourishment feature from the game Dungeon in Stone. Bjorn Yandel navigates the pixelated, top-down dungeon map as a system message confirms his victory over the goblin and shows his hunger level is now 7. Bjorn Yandel appears bloodied and battered, his teeth clenched in frustration as he reflects on his new reality, realizing it is far more hellish than the nightmare difficulty game he once played. Bjorn Yandel walks determinedly through a dark cave, covered in blood while holding a shield and a glowing ice weapon, realizing this world is highly similar to the background of a game he played. Bjorn Yondel's eye shows his determination, fresh blood splattered across his cheek and neck as he hears a dripping sound and realizes there must be a water source nearby. Bjorn Yandel lies injured on the crystal cavern floor while Erwin stands over him, both reacting as a voice echoes, announcing it hears water and has found a human. Bjorn Yandel looks off to the side with an intense expression, thinking that this was the first man he ran into after the party of adventurers. A bloodied Bjorn Yandel stands holding his shield in a cavern filled with glowing blue crystals as Erwin walks on a path below him. The adventurers in the labyrinth avoid speaking with one another unless necessary, similar to the game. Bjorn Yandel's bloodied hand touches a shimmering red gem on the rocky cavern floor, continuing his count as he moves methodically to the next crystal. Bjorn Yandel sits cross-legged and bloodied, surrounded by glowing pink gems on the floor. He holds out a clenched fist, reflecting that he has gathered a lot, a massive improvement from his past desperation, but acknowledges he still has problems. He feels incredibly fatigued. Bjorn Yandel's bloodied face is captured mid-yawn, tears of exhaustion welling up in his eyes as he struggles to remain conscious. Bjorn Yandel considers the two ways to sleep inside the labyrinth, recognizing the first option is to risk his life by sleeping in the safest place he can find. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood with glowing blue eyes, looks down from a higher vantage point at two men below. He shouts his second plan, demanding they form a temporary party to watch each other's backs while they sleep. Bjorn Yandel and his companion recoil in terror from the swirling red energy that emanates from an unseen figure's back as he stammers an apology to retreat. Erwin and her injured party members refuse the newcomer, shouting that their group is full and cannot accept anyone else. She states her distrust of barbarians and complains about the smell of blood. Bjorn Yandel stands defiantly among glowing blue crystals, his muscular body covered in blood. He wears a blindfold and thinks about being rejected every single time. Bjorn Yandel's face is splattered with blood as he grimaces, his expression contorted with intense rage. He shouts that he is not asking for a permanent alliance, insisting he just wants a temporary party to get enough sleep, and that is all. Erwin's boot lands on the crystalline ground as she says, "Excuse me." Bjorn Yandel, bare-chested and covered in blood, turns to face her. Bjorn Yandel stands in a glowing crystal cavern holding a shovel. He then smirks in a close-up and asks if someone is looking for a night companion. Bjorn Yandel, splattered with blood, stares with a furious and confused expression, shouting in disbelief at the unseen person. Bjorn Yandel speaks with a subtle, knowing smile, suggesting he hoped for a strong barbarian to stand watch for him through the night. A voice shouts in realization, questioning the previous statement before giving an assertive confirmation. Bjorn Yandel, bloodied and muscular, speaks to a person with their back turned, stating that he is actually looking for a night companion. Night companions look out for each other's backs so their partner can get some sleep. A purple-haired adventurer named Hans smiles and extends his gloved hand, offering to form a temporary party. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood with tribal tattoos on his bicep, holds out an open, glowing hand and declares that he accepts, stating his name is Bjorn, son of Yandel. Erwin's gloved hand clasps Bjorn Yandel's bloody one, sealing their contract as she accepts him as her night companion and calls him Bjorn. Bjorn Yandel smiles suggestively with flushed cheeks, proposing they spend the night alone together. Bjorn Yandel grips his neck, sweating profusely as blood runs down the side of his temple. An injured Bjorn Yandel expresses immense frustration as Erwin snatches a small object from his hand. He recalls losing a game of rock, paper, scissors, the event that forced him to spend his first night in the labyrinth with this person. A voice exclaims that it sounds weirder when said in words. Bjorn Yandel smirks triumphantly while holding a faint blue energy in his hand, declaring that he has won and will go to sleep first. Bjorn Yandel clenches his bloodied fist with a grim expression, resigning himself to the loss he always expected. Bjorn Yandel places a pocket watch into Erwin's bloodied hand, explaining it is a watch and telling her to hold it. He instructs her to wake him when the shortest hand points to a specific spot, then states that barbarians in this world are not supposed to know how to read one. Bjorn Yandel lies injured on the ground, his clothes stained with blood as blue energy emanates from his arm, and he looks away from Erwin in frustration. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood, examines a pocket watch. Erwin sleeps soundly surrounded by radiant crystals. Bjorn Yandel sits bloodied and injured in a cave, looking at Erwin sleeping in a bedroll. He considers asking to borrow the sleeping bag but decides against it, believing the request would be denied. Bjorn Yandel stands splattered in blood with injuries across his face. He lets out a wide yawn, looking completely tired and bored. Bjorn Yandel grips a golden pocket watch in his bloodied hand, willing time to flow faster. The hands of a golden pocket watch spin rapidly, blurring across the Roman numerals on its face. Bjorn Yandel stares forward with a serious expression, surrounded by glowing blue crystals, as he commands Hans to wake up. Bjorn Yandel, splattered in blood, supports a groggy Erwin as she wakes up next to a glowing ice structure. She yawns and asks if anything happened, and he tells her no, while an obscured body lies beneath the ice. Bjorn Yandel, injured and covered in blood, speaks to his companion, telling her it is now her turn to rest and that he will wake her in 2 hours. Bjorn Yandel's light blue eye glares forward, blood splattered on the skin below. Bjorn Yandel knows he cannot go to sleep. Bjorn Yandel holds the small, uncorked vial with a smug expression, thinking to himself that it's good the item is intact, and questioning how he can trust someone he just met. Bjorn Yandel lies sprawled on the icy ground amidst glowing blue crystals, heavily bloodied and injured, thinking that he is snoring like there's no tomorrow. Bjorn Yandel lies collapsed, his face grimacing in pain and covered in bloodied scratches from severe exhaustion and his injuries. Bjorn Yandel grunts in pain, blood on his cheek and sweat beading on his face as he glances nervously to the side, hoping his ruse has not been discovered. Erwin smirks and holds a pocket watch, looking down at the injured Bjorn Yandel, who groans in pain on the cavern floor, surrounded by glowing blue crystals. Bjorn Yandel, his tattooed back covered in blood, strains to turn the massive glowing blue crystalline structure, growling with immense effort and frustration. Bjorn Yandel grits his teeth with blood on his face, shouting that his guard is completely down and demanding Hans show his true colors. Bjorn Yandel stands hunched over, covered in blood and exhausted from a sleepless night as Erwin lies distressed on the ground before him. Bjorn Yandel grimaces with frustration, blood splattered across his shoulder and chest. Bjorn Yandel lies fast asleep in bed, his thoughts consumed with regret as he questions what he was thinking and wishes he had just slept. Bjorn Yandel sits with his back turned, keeping watch over the wounded Erwin as she rests on the ground wrapped in a blanket. A hammer and glowing crystals lie nearby while he thinks to himself, unable to let his guard down around someone he just met. Bjorn Yandel, spattered in blood, glares forward with a grim and determined expression despite being on the verge of fainting from exhaustion. Bjorn Yandel lies awake, his eye staring intensely from the shadows as he is unable to fall asleep. Bjorn Yandel strains with immense effort, his body covered in wounds as the word open appears above him. Bjorn Yandel sits on the ground, injured and bleeding as he struggles to speak. Erwin stands over him, placing a hand on his shoulder with a smug expression while glowing blue crystals surround them. Bjorn Yandel, spattered in blood and sweat, glares intensely to his right with saliva dripping from his mouth as he denies sleeping and tells his opponent to wipe their own mouth first. An uninjured Erwin clears her throat and smiles, apologizing and stating that thankfully nothing bad happened while they were both asleep, causing the heavily bloodied Bjorn Yandel to stare at her with an expression of pure shock and alarm. Bjorn Yandel, his face and neck splattered with blood, speaks with a strained expression, telling his companion to rest while he takes another watch duty. Bjorn Yandel smiles with his eyes closed, looking down as he extends an open hand. Bjorn Yandel looks up, his face splattered with blood and etched with strain as his eyes glow. He mutters a word of thanks. Bjorn Yandel recalls Hans approaching him with a benevolent smile, remembering the man who spoke to him first when he was struggling. He thinks about how Hans didn't blame him for falling asleep and instead told him to get some rest. Bjorn is relieved nothing bad happened and remembers that Hans even declined compensation for what was clearly Bjorn's fault. Bjorn Yandel lies prone on the ground, severely wounded and covered in blood among glowing crystals, and he chokes out pained groans as he tries to speak. She thinks there is not a single person as kind as he is. Bjorn Yandel's eye opens wide, his face splattered with blood as he has a moment of sudden realization. The words, "Not in Dungeon and Stones," appear in white text against a black background. Bjorn Yandel looks down with a gentle smile, his body surrounded by glowing blue energy, and he states that the person is awake. Bjorn Yandel kneels over his injured opponent with a smirk, raising his glowing and blood-splattered hammer high above his head to strike. A bloodied Bjorn Yandel looks up with a terrified expression as a blurred impact descends rapidly towards him. Bjorn Yandel unleashes a rapid combination on Erwin, landing a punch to the stomach, a kick to the ribs, and a final elbow strike to the head. Bjorn Yandel recoils, his eyes wide and mouth agape in pained shock. Bjorn Yandel kneels on the ground, bloodied and injured, holding his shield in a defensive posture as a red aura radiates from his body. Bjorn Yandel glares forward, his face spattered with blood and contorted in rage as one eye glows crimson within a dark, smoky aura. Bjorn Yandel shouts and charges forward, gripping his hammer as he dashes through the crystalline space. Bjorn Yandel is violently struck by an unseen force, the impact creating a bright flash across his already injured face. Bjorn Yandel screams in agony, tilting his head back as blood splatters across his face and chest. Bjorn Yandel slams his foot down, causing a powerful shockwave of energy to erupt from the ground. Bjorn Yandel staggers backward, heavily bleeding and injured, pleading for his attacker to stop as he yells that he can explain everything. Bjorn Yandel glares, his face splattered with blood, and thinks his opponent is more resilient than a goblin for enduring the hit, but resolves he can always just bash him again. Bjorn Yandel lunges forward with a furious expression and delivers a powerful shield smash, creating a bright impact of force. Bjorn Yandel is thrown backward by a burst of blue energy, tumbling through the air amidst flying debris. Erwin lies injured on the ground amidst glowing crystals and rubble, her body shaking in pain as Bjorn Yandel approaches her from behind. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood, looms over Erwin with glowing red eyes. She cowers on the ground beneath him, stammering a terrified apology. The purple-haired man, bloodied and bruised, reaches out his hand with a terrified expression, pleading to be spared. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood and heavily injured, stares with a pained and furious expression as he demands to know why he was attacked. The blood-splattered Bjorn Yandel stands over the injured Erwin inside a glowing cave. Erwin confesses he only wanted the mana stones and was just going to knock him unconscious. Bjorn glares at him, questioning if he truly attempted to kill a sleeping barbarian for a few stones. The bloodied and disfigured purple-haired man screams in terror. He frantically confesses he was also trying to loot the shield, explaining that items from barbarians sell for a high price. Erwin, visibly injured, stares down at the bloody foot on the ground and desperately asks if he will be let go now. An unseen voice shouts that it's bullshit, knowing the other is still hiding something. Erwin is violently struck in the chest, blood splattering from the powerful impact. Bjorn Yandel, bloodied and blindfolded, stomps the ground, causing an unseen person to cry out in pain as he gives them a final chance to tell him everything. Bjorn Yandel's thoughts race, recalling that killing another adventurer in Dungeon in Stone is a heinous crime, and that there must be another reason for what happened. Bjorn Yandel is pinned down by a bloodied, furry leg, his bruised face twisted in horror and pain. Bjorn Yandel stares in horror, his face bloodied and his eyes wide with disbelief. A severely injured man with a bruised and bloodied face screams, his eyes wide with terror, and shouts that barbarians' hearts are in high demand and sell for a high price on the black market. A glowing human heart floats above an intricate, luminous magic circle, a required ingredient for a newly developed magic spell. A stark realization hits the character as he finally understands. Bjorn Yandel realizes he was no different from a goblin in this fool's eyes. Bjorn Yandel battles multiple goblins across a blood-splattered landscape, his attacks causing glowing red crystals to emerge from the fallen creatures. Erwin observes the brutal fight from a distance with a smile. Bjorn Yandel, covered in blood, presses his foot down on the injured Erwin, pinning him to the cave floor. Erwin asks why he chose to act now, questioning the timing of the attack. Bjorn coldly explains that he also needed to rest. He wasn't being careful, he is just a selfish bastard. Bjorn Yandel sweats in terror with blood around his mouth as an unseen hand presses against his face, and he begs to be let go after claiming he's told them everything. Bjorn Yandel leans forward, spattered in blood, his face locked in a determined grimace. Bjorn Yandel grins, his mouth and upper body splattered with blood, and he chuckles while asking if he should let them go. Erwin lies defeated on the ground, his wrist bleeding as he looks up with an expression of shock and fear. He questions whether he is supposed to let them go. Bjorn Yandel stands bloodied and distressed, his eyes glowing red as a dark aura envelops him during his transformation. Bjorn Yandel's eyes are wide with stress, his face slick with sweat as he grimaces in desperation. Bjorn Yandel, bloodied and determined, raises his heavily bandaged arm, poised to strike and yelling that he will give it everything he has. Bjorn Yandel, bloodied and trapped, grips a bar while being violently crushed. He pleads for another chance, promising valuables from the city in exchange for his life. He has been in this world for approximately 24 hours, and his gloved hand lies severely injured in a spreading pool of blood. Bjorn Yandel stands over the defeated Erwin, his tattooed body covered in blood. He pants from exhaustion, struggling to remain upright. Erwin lies prone and motionless on the ground. Bjorn opens his mouth, barely able to utter a word. He killed a man. An achievement notification unlocks for committing a first murder, permanently increasing the spirit stat by 1. A system message indicates the next day has begun, confirming a shoulder guard has been equipped and his overall item level has increased by 13. Bjorn Yandel stands fully armored with a new backpack, warhammer, and shield, his expression stern. System messages announce he has acquired a backpack, increasing his inventory, and equipped a warhammer and leather boots, raising his overall item level. Bjorn Yandel reviews his new survival items, a water container, a pocket watch, a compass, and healing supplies including a potion and herbs. He then looks at his own blood-splattered armored hand. He wonders if he was able to live like one. Bjorn Yandel ascends the dark, crystalline steps, moving toward a bright blue glow illuminating the cavern ahead. Bjorn Yandel's status updates, showing his spirit has risen to 37, his item level has increased to 72, and his general combat power is now 81. Bjorn Yandel swings his warhammer, shattering the goblin's skull with a single devastating blow. Bjorn Yandel stares at his blood-splattered shield, questioning his decision to pick it over a weapon. He dismisses the thought, acknowledging he couldn't have known about his own combat skill. He sighs, concluding his proficiency must come from the barbarian's body, making it feel like someone else is fighting for him. Bjorn Yandel turns, holding a bloodied hammer and shield to face two small, armed goblins who look up at him. Bjorn Yandel stands in the darkness, his blue eyes glowing as he tightens his grip on his blood-splattered weapon and shield, realizing goblins are now appearing in pairs on the second day of the labyrinth. Bjorn Yandel realizes his combat skills increased thanks to his new weapon. Two snarling, goblin-like creatures charge forward, the one in front holding a golden stick while the other wields a curved knife. Bjorn Yandel drives his glowing fist into Erwin, declaring that his real-life playthrough is going pretty well. Bjorn Yandel unleashes a powerful downward strike, generating a bright, explosive impact. Bjorn Yandel kneels, injured on the stone floor, bleeding amidst swirling smoke and glowing blue crystals. Bjorn Yandel's face is covered in sweat, his expression contorted with extreme exhaustion as he admits his fatigue. He realizes he has been fighting goblins non-stop with less than 10 minutes of sleep since meeting Hans and understands he cannot continue this way. Bjorn Yandel stands alone in a dark crystal cave, his arms crossed over his bloodied and tattooed chest as he considers his survival odds until a footstep echoes nearby. Bjorn Yandel glares furiously, his teeth gritted in anger. Two green goblins armed with knives advance on Bjorn Yandel inside a cave lit by blue crystals, and he growls in frustration that they will not give him a single moment of peace. Bjorn Yandel roars in frustration, raising his massive blood-splattered hammer over the cowering monster. He prepares to bring the weapon down, enraged that another creature has appeared just minutes after he killed the last pair. The ground explodes from two consecutive impacts. Bjorn Yandel stands in the dark, rocky area, concluding he has taken care of all the visible goblins. Bjorn Yandel stands with his head bowed, looking utterly exhausted as he pleads for a moment of peace so he can sleep. Bjorn Yandel's eyes widen in alarm as a goblin lunges, raising a bloody knife to stab him. A system message flashes, notifying him that he was attacked while asleep. Bjorn Yandel's face twists in shock, his eyes wide with alarm as he realizes he completely failed to sense someone approaching. A bright explosion of light and debris erupts from a powerful impact against the large figure. The green-skinned creature recoils violently from a powerful impact, its face showing complete shock. Bjorn Yandel pants heavily, his face strained as one of his eyes glows with an intense light. Bjorn Yandel's eyes glow as he brings his hammer down in a brutal blow on the cowering monster, which flinches from the impact amidst blood and glowing crystals. Bjorn Yandel pants, sweaty and exhausted, glancing back over his shoulder at a growling creature rushing towards him. He thinks to himself that he has no more energy and needs the creature to keep running. Bjorn Yandel pants heavily, sweat drenching his chest as blood spurts from a shallow gash across his neck. Bjorn Yandel twists the cork from a small bottle containing a glowing red liquid, preparing to treat his wounds. Bjorn Yandel grimaces in pain as he pours a glowing potion onto the bloody wound on his chest. Bjorn Yandel stumbles through a dark, crystalline environment. Exhausted after being separated from Hans for 14 hours, he remains wary, unable to trust anyone now that he knows barbarian hearts are in high demand. Bjorn Yandel looks apprehensive as sweat drips down his face, considering his next move. He resolves to trust a fellow barbarian, concluding it is the most plausible option he has left. He concludes with desperate urgency that he must find a barbarian. Bjorn Yandel stands as multiple groups of smiling humans approach him, offering to be his night companion or asking him to join their adventuring parties. He glares at them, suspicious of their sudden and uncharacteristic friendliness compared to the previous day. Bjorn Yandel states he is looking for a barbarian like himself, reflecting that he was covered in blood without proper boots the day before and looked too uncivilized for anyone to trust him for a single night. Bjorn Yandel stands in a dark, rocky cave across from another man who questions his search for his own kind, asking him why that task will be tough. Bjorn Yandel stands in profile, a slight look of concern appearing on his face. Bjorn Yandel stands with his back to a smiling Erwin inside a cavern filled with glowing crystals. Erwin wishes him protection and guidance on his journey, and he thanks her before asking himself if he should give up on finding his people. Bjorn Yandel stares ahead with a contemplative expression, thinking to himself that he must be realistic and find a night companion, barbarian or not, just as long as it is not a human. Bjorn Yandel takes 2 steps forward across the dark, rocky ground. All goes black. Footsteps echo through a dark, cavernous passage illuminated by glowing blue crystals. Bjorn Yandel's blue eye widens in shock, his brow furrowing. He wanders around for another hour or so. Bjorn Yandel looks down at Erwin as she huddles on the ground of a dimly lit cave, her bow and quiver lying beside her. Erwin sits on the ground and recoils with a distressed expression. Erwin stares ahead with wide, anxious eyes and a furrowed brow, a single drop of sweat on her face as she thinks, finally,